They have a saying up in Canada that if you're coming on, come on. And it was originally from Niagara Falls with Howard Clarence Howard, but that was the 90s. This is now. And representing Consort, Alberta by way of Airdrie, we have a guy who trains in Calgary and Chad the Monster Anheliger, and this guy is a lot of fun to watch. It's not often that you have a fighter making a UFC debut, having started their MMA career at 2-5, and then going on a 9-fight win streak, plenty of finishes along the way. 9 of the 11 by finish, 6 knockouts. And for Chad Anheliger, former Rise FC champ at 125, at 135, and he's really been able to recreate his MMA career by switching camps and going to Champions Creed MMA out of Calgary. Like I had mentioned, I mean, Hakeem Dawodu over there, he picked up a giant win his last time out against Mike Trezano a couple of weeks ago. And for Anheliger, it really was a lot of fun to watch him fight. His last time out, he took on Muin Gafarov. And if you watch that fight against Gafarov, it was an interesting one. I mean, his opponent had a Master of Combat Sambo background. He had fights against John Lineker, Reese McLaren, and Kevin Bellingon over with one championship.
Which is wild that he was fighting on Contender Series.
That really was it. And I mean, he was putting on for Tajikistan. We hadn't had any fighters in that region in the UFC. He was a giant favorite. And Anheliger goes out there, drops him fairly early, second round. Opponent comes back, wins the round. Third round, relatively close, but Anheliger gets the win. Ends up getting the win by split decision. And Dana White's reasoning after the fight was, 5-1 underdog, and he's Canadian, so what the hell? Don't like that when the boss signs a guy for a what the hell, because he's Canadian, but for Anheliger, a very, very fun style. I don't know what the ceiling's going to be where he just had his 35th birthday a couple of months ago, but he's an opportunity to win this weekend taking on Jesse Strader.
And that's the thing for Anheliger. He's going to have a fan-friendly style. He's going to be sort of one of those, it might be too early to say this, but maybe even a Joe Rogan's favorite if he catches him on the right prelim. Because remember the last sort of big Canadian prospect that was hyped up, who was in his 30s, who had a really good UFC debut, and then never really fully attained all of his hype? Am I almost perfectly describing Gavin Tucker?
From Atlanta, Canada?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of parallels between these two guys because there were some concerning signs about Gavin Tucker coming onto the UFC scene. He didn't fight a very high level of competition on the regional scene. There was one of those stats where if you combine the records of all of his opponents, it was like 30 and 90. It was not very good at all. But if you just looked at the positives, you could look at, wow, he's got such great volume striking. He's got wrestling too. I feel like with Anheliger, there could be a version of that out there that I am a little bit concerned about because you look at his striking, and it is really flashy, it is very exciting, but he does get into some 50-50 exchanges, which are always going to make a fight much closer than they have to be. But again, when you're 35 years old coming into the UFC, is that the worst thing for him? I kind of look at this fight two different ways. Breaking it down X's and O's wise, I still think Anheliger's probably the slightly more skilled guy in this, and we'll get to Strader in a minute. But for him and sort of his overall career trajectory, it's either are you going to fight your way all the way to a title shot, or do you just want to be like the fun Scott Holtzman kind of veteran guy, make your mark while you're here and get out? Because I think he could have that kind of a streak to him if he wanted to. He doesn't have the best record coming in. He is only 11-5. He is 35 years old. There are some concerning signs. But I can't sit here and say I dislike anything about his MMA game, especially watching it. It is so much fun.
Yeah, there's one major thing that I don't like. It is the grappling. Now, for Anheliger, giant positive. When you're taking on a Master of Combat Sambo, you're in the third round. Your coach says, listen, you got to defend all the takedowns. He defended every single takedown in the third round of that fight. If I'm not mistaken, there were 7 takedown attempts. Pieced him up on the feet, taking on a really good fighter. Again, you're kind of brought in with, the Billy Talent, nothing to lose when no one knows your name.
One of those classic Lambda Slaughter Contender Series fights. There's one of those every single time around where it's like, wait, why is there a minus 700 as the co-main event?
And the worst part about it was, for Anheliger, you had the selling point of, well, he beat Brady Heistan over with Rise to keep that bantamweight strap, and that is great. And then there was a long layoff, almost 2 years between that fight and the fight against Gafarov. So it is interesting. I mean, for Anheliger, again, those losses were so long ago, all 5 of them by submission. Jesse Strader will not submit Chad Anheliger. If it happens, I'll do another shoey on the internet. But for Jesse Strader, very much cut from the same cloth. He is a car crash striker. And the best part about Jesse Strader, decent cardio, even though he does tend to finish his fights early. You look at him over on Instagram, I think he's probably the most bodied up fighter on this card. The strength and conditioning is absolutely insane. He's been working his boxing with the boxing coach.
You don't think Skelly has that honor?
No, I don't. And for Jesse Strader, the best part about his game and the way that he can win out in a fight like this, he's definitely the bigger fighter. He's definitely the longer fighter. He uses his leg kicks to great effect, and he starts at the body and works his way up to the head, something that you rarely see in MMA, and his combinations are so fast and so crisp, and a little bit of power on the end. I mean, listen, the loss to Montel Jackson, you hate to see it, but if Montel Jackson fought every other weekend, he could be a superstar. And then the other part about it, his other loss was to Marcelo Rojo a few years ago over with Combate, and if you want to get specific about it, that fight was 3 years and 2 months ago, so it's been a while. But Jesse Strader coming into the UFC, I was a little bit down on him. You definitely didn't learn anything out of that Jackson fight. You did learn, again, hand speed, good job working the body even in that fight, but when it went bad, it did go really bad. But I hold Montel Jackson in very high regard.
I think Montel Jackson will be in the top 15 sooner rather than later. I really do. Like, that's how good of a... Like, his stand-up, 9 out of 10, and that might not even be doing it service. He has great submission ability, amazing submission defense, a great grappler. Like, he checks all those boxes. This is an interesting fight, because the way I look at it is, Anheliger's probably the steadier fighter. I agree with you, Strader has good cardio, but he almost fights in those big bursts, kind of similar to Jared Cannonier over the weekend, where Cannonier won't do anything for like 1-2 minutes at a time, and then he'll burst with a big action. I can see this fight being very similar to that, where if Strader does have success, it'll be one of those big bursts. And I like exactly what you said. This is my big point I wanted to bring up too. Strader is good at setting up his power shots. He will go to the legs and then try to use those techniques to then open up your head. And against a guy like Anheliger, it's going to be interesting if those work, because Chad does pressure forward a lot, and if you're trying to kick someone who's always pressuring you, you might be crowding your own distance, and you might be making it easier for him to hit you. And that's sort of where I land on this fight. Like, I know what the odds are on this. I know you want to get to those, but I think Anheliger has a great chance to win this fight, but I see this as being very 50-50, because I think we're going to get a lot of 50-50 exchanges where Anheliger might have to eat 2 shots to get on the inside. I think he will be able to land his 2 or 3 because he is very dedicated to that game plan. Again, you don't go 11-5 and not make wholesale changes throughout your MMA game unless you are dedicated to like moving forward, trying to knock guys out. I think Anheliger is the steadier fighter, I guess, and that's what I keep on going back to. So I will predict him, but I think this is going to be a great showcase fight for both guys.
Well, I mean, at 135, Brian Keller has a tattoo of a skull with headphones on it. If you look at it for Chad Anheliger, he has a tattoo of a skull with crossbones, sunglasses, and flames. So I don't know who has the better tattoo, but for Chad Anheliger, it's pretty cool that way. And when I look at this fight, you talk about the odds, and you talk about the overall career trajectory of an Anheliger. Like, could he be like a Murat Belayev over with ACB, where he has his pro debut a couple weeks shy of his 38th birthday, and now we're 46, we're still fighting, we're a former featherweight champ over there? It could happen.
I watch a lot of ACB, Craig.
I just have it, well, it's not even ACB anymore, but I do have a hard time trying to project that on him. So for Anheliger, opens minus 300 favorite, minus 279 right now.
Steep.
For Jesse Strader, open plus 250 is plus 222. At a minus 279, that's a 73.6% implied probability that Anheliger gets the win. And I don't see it that way, so that's why I have to go with the underdog. I like Jesse Strader with his pressure. I like him with his volume. I don't like his chin. But in a fight with Anheliger, I mean, I do think Strader has a good opportunity to win, more so than that implied probability. So I go with him. And Matt, I'll flip it on over to you this way. Anheliger, we talk about Canadians in MMA right now. I mean, Felicia Spencer retired, but his teammate Dawodu had a really good showing a couple weeks ago. In terms of Canadian MMA, and a Canadian story that I have to pass along to everybody today, I went to Canadian Tire today. I had to get some oil. I also picked up, for the first time in my life, the most ratchet drink ever, Full Throttle Energy. Not as bad as I thought it would be. I definitely never thought I would drink one, but I was at Canadian Tire. Your options were limited. I'm walking around that store with a big baller brand hoodie, which sets off a weird energy. And then all of a sudden, one of Canada's biggest stars comes on the loudspeakers, as loud as I think they could have played it. And they played Nice for What by Drake, the clean version. And I felt like the weirdest person in that store that was the only one who caught that vibe. So that is what I have to say. That's my Canadian story for the day. But I can't pick the Canadian in this fight.
That was a lot to breakdown. I like Chad in this matchup. Again, if he gets knocked out, I won't be surprised whatsoever because his style plays more into him getting TKO'd. I know a lot of his losses do come by submission, but I think you'd agree with this. When he moves forward, it is with reckless abandon. And let's say he fought Montel Jackson. I have a very good feeling it would end in a very similar way that Jesse Strader's fight with Jackson did, but I will pick Anheliger in this matchup.
Both of us split on the pick. I'm going with California's own former Aaron Carter boxing coach, Jesse Strader. Listen, he's got an interesting nickname and an interesting fighting style, Matt, going with Alberta's own Chad
He couldn't even get Aaron Carter ready to fight Lamar Odom, though. Is he that good?
Well, I mean, you look at where Aaron Carter gained weight for that fight. It was right front and center.
I guess Lamar is still a world-class athlete.
Big time fight coming up this week. You let us know down below in the comments section if this one went off the rails and who you have in this fight. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.